Good evening. I'm Dr. Arvind Santosh. I'm going to be talking about anatomy of female reproductive tract today. Okay, so this is going to be a very elaborative session. Okay, so if you're having any questions, you can ask it in the chat box, or you can I'll see the chat box once in a while in between, and I can respond to it. Okay. The thing is, this is going to be a very elaborate session. I'm going to start from the basics. And தமிழையும் இங்கிலீஷ்லையும் மாற்றி பேசுவேன். ஸோ இன்கேஸ் உங்களுக்கு புரியலன்னா ரெண்டு ஒரே சொன்னதை வந்து நான் திருப்பி தமிழ் இங்கிலீஷ் மாற்றி தான் சொல்ல போறேன். ஸோ வந்து டோன்ட் பி அஃப்ரைட் இஃப் ஐம் டாக்கிங் இன் தமிழ். I'll be repeating the same thing in English also for you guys. Okay, so in the class I am thinking that I have both first year MBBS and final MBBS. So for first year MBBS students, if you are not able to understand certain things, it is all right. This is going to be at the level of a final year student, and for final year MBBS students, I will be touching upon a few topics which will include even for topics for your NEET PG entrance preparation also. Okay, so it might be a little bit tough for you here and there. If it is tough, don't worry. It is not that you should understand everything in this one single class. Anatomy is a very difficult topic, especially for a pelvic anatomy in both males and females. So don't worry about it. If possible, we'll upload this on YouTube, so you can check the YouTube video afterwards for repeated revision. Okay. Okay. So the headings which we are going to cover in this class, or in a little bit in this class or in subsequent classes, will be in embryology and development.
Yes,
so we'll be talking about embryology and development, clinical correlation of development, pelvic structure. We're going to be talking about the bones, muscles, blood supply, lymphatics, and nerves. And only then we'll be talking about viscera, okay, and its relations. Okay, so this is going to be a little exhaustive. So we'll start with embryology. What is going to be the development of the urogenital tract? Okay, so when you see this table here, in this table here, you can see that development of genital tract is kept close to the development of the urinary system also. Okay. Why do you think this is so? But basically, you can understand that by anatomy wise, both the urinary tract and genital tract are very close together, located very close together. They have some amount of proximity. That is, if they are because they are close together, you can assume that they have been developed from regions which are close together. Okay. So in this table, there are a lot of facts. I don't want you to know all the facts. I just want you to understand that genital development and urinary tract development occurs in very close proximity. Okay. So we'll discuss about urinary tract development first. Okay. Why? Because 10% of infants born with some sort of anomaly in the genitourinary system will present with one anomaly. They will present with another anomaly in the other system. So, for example, if a baby is born with an anomaly in the urinary system, that baby will also have an anomaly in another system, which is going to be the genital system. Okay. So this is why I want you to understand that you have to know about the urinary system development and the genital system development. Okay. So for the urinary system, we have basically kidneys, we have the renal collecting system, we have ureter, and then we have bladder and urethra. Okay. See, I put a different first three parts is going to be different from the development of the bladder and the urethra. Okay. Okay. So once we have understood this concept, we can go into little bit more depth. Okay. So first, how does this begin? Okay, this begins at the 6th week of gestation. Okay, you have something called as the pronephros. Okay, what the pronephros is basically it is going to be a part of the mesenchyme. Okay, this is the area. Okay, I'll tell you. So this is going to be the embryo. Okay, understand that embryo means it is from fertilization to 9 weeks of gestation. Okay, anything beyond 9 weeks is going to be fetus. Okay, so here we saw we are talking about week 4 or 6, 4 to 6. So in the embryonic life, okay, this is how the embryo will be. So we are making a cross section. Okay, so we have 3 layers of germ cells, right? Of germ cell that is going to be split into ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. Okay. So ectoderm is going to be the lining of the outside. So this outer lining, no, is going to be the ectoderm. Okay, so that is going to be ectoderm. Endoderm is going to be the inner lining. Okay, so this inner lining, no, this not this actually this is not inner lining. This is the inner lining. Okay, this is going. It will go inside the urinary into the genital tract. So the yolk sac and it will cover the genital tract. This is going to be the endoderm. Okay, so here you can see that this area will be covered by the endoderm. Okay, and this area is going to be covered by the ectoderm. The neural tube is going to be a part of the ectoderm. Okay, the remaining area in between these endo and ectoderm is going to be the mesoderm. Okay, so mesoderm is going to be the tissue which is being derived from the intermediate layer. So the kidneys are going to be developed from the nephrogenic cord. Okay, which is actually a longitudinal mass of the mesoderm. Okay, so here this is the nephrogenic cord. Okay, so this nephrogenic cord is going to give rise to the kidney. You understand that this is going to be the mesodermal derivative. Okay, so this is going to come in 3 different timelines. Okay, first you are going to have a organ called as the pronephros, and this is going to become the mesonephros, and this aprama and third will become the metanephros. Okay, so nephrogenic cord is going to be it will develop into 3 things. Okay, it will develop first into pronephros, and the pronephros will regress. Pronephros will develop and then it will regress. It will again then in that place mesonephros will develop and that will regress to form metanephros. Okay. So why are we worried? Why are we more interested about this development? Is because mesonephros, which is going to be the something colloquially called the middle kidney, will have a few functions before regressing. Okay, so this is going to grow caudally. It will go and join the excretory canal called cloaca. Okay, so cloaca is actually the it is going to be a place where you have connection, opening of the urinary canal, the gastrointestinal canal. Okay, so this connection of the urinary canal into the outside world is called the cloaca, and that is done by the mesonephros. Okay, and it is the place where metanephros starts to develop. Okay, and mesonephros is going to help in the formation of something called as the mesonephric duct or the Wolffian duct. That is going to be the that is going to develop into the male reproductive system. Okay, so what happens to the female reproductive system? You have something called as the paramesonephric or the Mullerian duct, which lies lateral to the Wolffian duct. Okay, so this is going to develop into the female genital system. Okay, so this is why any congenital anomaly associated in the urinary system is going to have an associated anomaly in the reproductive system also. That is why if you are having a patient with any disorders of sexual organs, okay, so the disorders of development, okay, that's called DSD, disorders of sexual development. So when you have any patient with the sexual developmental disorder, you have to look at the renal system of the patient to diagnose if there is other uh, any other anomalies. Okay, okay. So now we'll go to the genital system development. Okay, so once we understood that mesonephros is going to be developed, you are going to have mesonephric duct and Wolffian duct. Okay, so this is going to further develop into the genitalia. So in the genital system, we have basically ovary, and then we have internal genital organs, and then external genital organs. Okay, so this is how we are going to have divide the female reproductive system. Okay, so all of these are going to develop in from different sources, primary sources. Okay, so the gonads will develop from the from one region called the genital ridge. The Wolffian and Mullerian duct. So here the Mullerian duct will give rise to the internal genital organs. The external genitalia will be developed from the urogenital sinus. Okay, okay. So understand that gender is not apparent until 12th week of embryonic life. Okay, this is a very important point. So for example, if this is actually a neat question for you, if someone is asking whether you can identify the sex of the fetus, and they show a scan with 8 weeks of gestation, you cannot identify the sex of the fetus with that. You need to wait until 12th week of gestation to for the fetus to have some differentiation between the gonads and the reproductive system to find out what is the sex of the fetus. Okay, and understand one very important point, that the gender is actually based on the elaboration of testis determining factor. Okay, so if the fetus has Y chromosome, okay, the fetus has Y chromosome, this is going to have something called as a testis determining factor. Okay, and this is going to create something called as anti-Mullerian hormone, and this anti-Mullerian hormone will inhibit Mullerian duct. Okay, because it is inhibiting Mullerian duct, it will lead to the growth of Wolffian duct. So this is going to be the male genital tract. This is going to be the female genital tract. Okay. Okay. So here you should understand that the androgens. You should understand that female development is the basic developmental path of a human embryo. So if there's a human embryo and there's no hormonal influence on that embryo, that embryo will grow to become a female embryo. Okay, so even if the embryo does not have any estrogen or testosterone, it is going to be developed into a female embryo. But if you have testosterone, so if testosterone alone is there, that testosterone will convert it into will make the development towards the male reproductive system. Okay, into a male individual. That is why you have to be very sure that when you are doing like when you are having a patient with hermaphroditism, or when you are having a patient with ambiguous genitalia, you do a karyotyping to find out whether the patient is having a Y chromosome or a X chromosome. Okay, okay. So this is the development of the gonads. Okay, so you have gonads, okay, like you have the ovary or the testis, okay. In this, you're going to have three different types of cells. One is going to be the structural cells. The other one is going to be supportive cell. Other one is going to be a like sex cell. Like you will have something to it constitutes the structure of the ovary, something which is going to support the uh, the reproductive cell, like the ovum or the ovum in the female and the sperm in the male. Okay, so that is going to be the one cell, and one other cell is going to be obviously is going to be a gonad. Okay, so you are going to have three different cells. Just one second. Okay, so you're going to have these three cells. So each of the cells is going to come from one area, and primordial germ cells are going to be the sex cells, and they are going to come from the yolk sac. Okay, this is the yolk sac. So these primordial germ cells will arise from the yolk sac. Okay, they go into the they move into the genital ridge, something like the nephrogenic cord, and then they develop into the ovary or testis based on the testis determining factor, which I told you. Okay. Okay. So if that is there, you will have the Mullerian inhibiting factor or anti-Mullerian hormone. Okay, this is called Mullerian inhibiting factor or AMH. Okay. So if that is there, that will cause regression of the Mullerian ducts, and this testis will secrete testosterone, which will cause the growth of the seminal vesicles and vas deferens. Okay, and along with this is going to work on the internal reproductive system or internal reproductive organs. Okay, and you will have this testosterone will get converted into dihydrotestosterone, and that is going to cause fusion of labioscrotal folds and growth of the pallus and the prostate. Okay, so this is going to develop for the help in development of the external reproductive organs. Okay, so if this is not there, if this TDF is not there, testis determining factor is not there, the gonad will develop into ovary. Okay, so there is no anti-Mullerian factor, there is no testosterone, so automatically regression of the Wolff index happen, and the undifferentiated gonad differentiates into ovary, and then you will have the growth of Mullerian duct into the other organs like fallopian tube, uterus, and vagina. Okay, okay. So here you can see there are multiple genes involved. I don't want you to know all this, but just have a look that there are a lot of problems here. Okay, so if the gonad is not all of these gene mutations can cause XY gonadal dysgenesis. Okay, and they can cause azoospermia, oligospermia, which means azoospermia means there is no sperm in the semen. Okay. Oligospermia means decreased sperm count in the semen. Okay, and this also can cause a very important disease called AIS. AIS is androgen insensitivity syndrome. Okay, so this is complete and this is partial. Okay, so this can cause confusion and this can cause ambiguous genitalia. Okay, again similarly you are going to have disorders of sexual development, which is going to cause abnormal ovary and abnormal testis. Okay. Okay, and this is important because you need to understand that this is going to be the causes of male and female pseudo and true hermaphroditism. Okay. Okay. So this is about the development of gonads. Okay. So paramesonephric duct. Okay. This is also called as the Mullerian duct. Okay. The paramesonephric duct of the Mullerian duct, it will develop into, okay, that duct will be a very long duct like this. Okay, so these ducts have a cranial end, superior end and the inferior end. Okay, the inferior portion will become the uterovaginal canal. That means it will form the uterus and vagina. Vaginas, it will form the top portion, upper portion of the vagina. Okay, the cranial or unfused portions on the top will form the fallopian tubes. Okay, so this is the development of the uterus and the fallopian tube. Okay, so here you have the urogenital sinus here, which is going to be developed from the cloaca. I will come to that. You have two paramesonephric ducts, the Mullerian ducts. They join together, they form the uterine cavity and they form the fallopian tube. Okay, and here you can see they form the upper 1/3 of the vagina. The lower 1/3 is formed by the urogenital sinus. Okay, so this is how the development of the female genital tract occurs. The external genitalia, as I told, is going to occur from the urogenital sinus. Okay, see, you have this age. Now, this is actually developed from the cloaca, which I told in the beginning. Okay, remember this cloaca? Where is it? Remember this cloaca? That is going to give rise to the development of the urogenital sinus. Okay, and this urogenital sinus will differentiate to form the lower third of the vagina. Okay, and along with that, it is going to form the external sexual organs, okay, reproductive organs, which is going to be the clitoris, labia majora, labia minora, and the clitoris also has the inner parts. Basically, this is what is going to formed by the external reproductive system. Okay, so here you can see that the urogenital sinus will differentiate clitoris. Okay, this is going to be the rough diagram. Like, we'll deal in detail about this later. So I just understand that this is going to grow into fold. Okay, this cloaca, if this is a layer, okay, this is going to fold on itself. This is going to fold on itself like this on two sides. Okay, and this will collapse on this, and this is going to form a swelling. Okay, this is going to be called as the swellings, genital swellings. Okay, that is the labioscrotal swellings, and this is going to develop into the labia majora in the male and scrotum in the labia majora in the female and scrotum in the male. Okay, and labia minora is going to develop from the urogenital folds. Okay, this is very important because you will have learnt about a condition called as undescendant testis. Okay, so undescendant testis, what happens is, like, the testis should end in course of development, it should be pulled from the peritoneal cavity into the scrotum. Okay, so if it is developing, it is going to be pulled from the peritoneal cavity via the inguinal canal into the scrotum. Okay, so this is any obstruction or any defect in this pathway is going to make the testis get stuck in some location along the entire pathway. That is called as undescended testis. Okay, so what happens is, in patients of with undescended testes, those testes, because they are in the inside the human body, in the cavity or in the abdominal cavity, they are exposed to high temperature and they become infertile. Okay, and then they are also they are also more prone for testicular cancer in those undescended testes. Similarly, what happens is in patients with uh, pseudohermaphroditism, what happens is sometimes what happens that the ovary actually these patients will be male. Okay, so they'll have testes, but that external genital organ will become that of a female. So what happens is, like the scrotum, the testis will be located in the labia majora. Okay, but they'll have something like a female genital tract. So this is what happens in the hermaphrodite. Okay, so hermaphrodite, they will be have basically they'll be actually XY. They'll have a testis, but what happens is because they are going to have inadequate testosterone or some pathologies in their developmental process, it is going to not, they won't have a glans penis, they won't have a urethral groove, they will have some a bigger clitoris developed, and then their testes will be located in the scrotum, in the labia majora instead of the scrotum. So there is a lot of clinical application of the embryology which you learn. Okay, okay, so I might not cover entire anatomy today, don't worry that this is taking long, because this is a very important chapter. This is actually very important for you to understand every other aspect of obstetrics and gynecology in the future. Okay, that's why I'm taking it in a very slow manner. Okay, and if you think this is fast, I'm very sorry, because if I take very slow, then I will tell more details and you will get too confused. Okay, so we'll just understand why we have spent so much of time for embryology. Okay, so in the urinary system, when you can see the clinical chloration, there's something called as renal agenesis. Okay, so what happens is there's a absence of one kidney that does not develop at all. Okay, so here this is a MRI scan. Okay, this is an MRI which is like 3D image has been made with the computer. Okay, so MRI scan has been taken and the computer makes a 3D image of it. Okay, so this is an MRI scan. Here you can see that this patient has only one kidney, the other kidney is missing. Okay, and this is the urinary bladder. So understand, unilateral agenesis is a very common phenomena. And what happens is, if they have one absence of one kidney, they can also have any abnormality or absence of the fallopian tubes, uterus or ovaries. Why? Because kidneys are going to develop from the metanephros. Fallopian tubes, ovary and vagina are going to develop from the mesonephros or the mesonephric duct. Okay, so this is why you should be very aware that this patient can have any of the uterine anomalies if the patient is a female. Okay, so there can be abnormality in the position. The kidney can be absent, the kidney can be in a different position, or the kidney can have a different collecting system. Okay, so here you are going to see something called as a horseshoe kidney. Okay, so here the kidney is shaped like a horseshoe. This you would have seen in Hollywood movies or in cartoons. Okay, they'll put a steel or iron shoe like this, like one bent rod. They'll hit on the hoof of the the horse. So this is called as a horseshoe. Okay, so this is shaped like a horseshoe. So they're calling this a horseshoe kidney. Okay, so this is one of the anomalies. So another anomaly is going to be renal malrotation. Okay, so what happens is, you need to understand two things. First thing is, kidney is going to develop as a pelvic organ and it's going to ascend into the abdominal cavity. Okay, so in this process it will rotate 90 degrees. Okay, similarly testis will develop as an abdominal organ, but it had to descend into the perineum or the scrotum. Okay, so if this does not happen, this is called as undescended testis. or cryptorchidism. Okay, so kidney should go from below above, and the testis should move from above to below. So this is any pathology here can cause any congenital anomalies. Okay, one more thing is you have something called as a collecting system abnormalities. That is, you will have a duplex collecting system. Okay, so I have a very nice diagram here. Okay, so this is going to be an X-ray. Okay, this is not a plain X-ray. This is a contrast X-ray. Contrast, what do you give? You're going to give barium sulfate. Okay, so here what happens is this patient has, it's actually intravenous pyelogram. Okay, so you are going to give IV drug, IV dye into the patient, and that is going to get secreted into the kidneys, and that is going to get excreted. So here you can see the kidney. Okay, you can see the kidney. You can see the collect calyces and all here, and then the renal pilus, and then the ureter. Okay, but here you have one ureter, you have two ureters here. Can you see? Okay, so this is going to be a double ureter. Okay, so this is called as a duplex ureter. Okay, so I have two neat questions for you here. Okay, one question is, there's something called as the Wiegand-Mayer rule. Wiegand-Mayer rule. There's the rule. This rule is that if you're having a duplex ureter, if you're having two ureters from the same kidney, it indicates that the first ureter is going to insert into the bladder most distally, and the distal ureter, like the second ureter, will insert into the bladder superiorly. Okay, you understand? I'll put in different colors. Okay, the ureter which is coming on top, no, this will insert at a lower area. The ureter which is coming in the bottom will insert into the upper area in the bladder. This is the rule. This is called Wiegand-Mayer rule. Okay, and for every rule, this rule has an exception. Okay, that exception is called as Stephen's ectopic pathway. In this rule, in Stephen's ectopic pathway, what it means is, the first ureter will come and insert above, second lower ureter will insert below. This is the Stephen's ectopic pathway. Okay, so this is why very important neat question for you. Okay, so this is about the developmental clinical application of the developmental disorders. Okay, so what I told, no, I remember I told that you were having something called as a hermaphrodite. Okay, so these are patients who are going to have one sex organ, but they will have the one gonad, but they are going to have opposite external genitalia. Okay, so in case of true hermaphrodite, okay, here with male habitus, they have a ovary. You see that they have a ovary, but also they have a testis. They have the penis. Okay, so what happens is, you going to have many different conditions. Okay, you will have this is actually a bit advanced for you. Don't get confused if you don't understand it. You can have one ovary, the other gonad as a testis. You can have ovary and testis in the same gonad also. This is called as a ovotestis. Okay, so this is why you are supposed to know about the development of embryology of the renal system and the reproductive system. Okay, again you are having different. These are all uterine anomalies. Okay, so then I should tell you what is the normal uterus, how the normal uterus looks. Okay, the normal uterus will look like this. You will have fallopian tubes, you will have the uterus with the cervix, and you will have the vagina. Okay, so you are going to have a triangular endometrial cavity. Okay, so here you are going to have some two uteruses and two vaginas. This is called as a didelphys. Okay, so any both uterus and vagina are double. This can be two varieties. We can have a single vagina, but the important point is you have double uterus. Double uterus means it is called as a uterus didelphys. Bicornuate uterus means you have two different horn. That is called cornua means horn. Means horn. Okay, so you are going to have two different horns of the uterus. Okay, because this is all happening because remember those two Mullerian ducts which are going to fuse, they fuse in the inferior part, forming the uterovaginal canal. So here this is the problem in this area. Okay, so this is going to cause uterus didelphys or bicornuate uterus, or once they join, no, you see the diagram, no, this is septum there, and this septum should dissolve. This septum should dissolve. If this is not dissolving, you're going to have a separate uterus. Okay, or if one of the Mullerian ducts is not joining properly, you're going to have a unicornuate uterus. Okay, so I'll show you that image here. Okay, see, you are going to have the uterine septum. This septum should dissolve. If this is not dissolving, you will have a separate uterus in the future. Okay, why are you concerned about all this? Is because all this will cause problems for us when you are treating the patient. Okay, they will land up with infertility. They will land up with abnormal placental location. They land up with abnormal fetal presentation. That means the fetus size will not be in a normal position. That will be in an abnormal position, and that is going to cause difficulties in delivery. Okay, so and they can cause bleeding before delivery. Okay, they can cause rupture of the uterus. So there are a lot of these problems which they can cause. So that is why we should be aware of what the pathology is. Okay, so understand that if a patient is coming, no, like with pregnancy in one of these horns, okay, this is a malformed uterus. This cannot tolerate pregnancy till term or 40 weeks. Okay, so this uterus can rupture while the baby is developing inside. So that is why we want to know about all these things, and that is why we look for anomalies in the uterus while doing scan. Okay, okay. So we will now go to the bones and the pelvic structure. Okay, here we're going to discuss about bone. We'll discuss a little bit about muscle, about blood supply, lymphatics, and then finally about nerves. Okay, but this, I think all of you should have an idea about it, so we'll just talk about the important aspects alone. Okay, so understand that you are going to have three paired bones, a sacrum and a coccyx. This is going to constitute the pelvis. Okay, so this pelvis is going to have three paired bones. Those are the ilium, ischium, and pubis. Okay, so these ossify to form the pelvis along with the sacrum and the coccyx. Okay, so this is the bony structure of the pelvis. Okay, so here you are going to be look at one side of the pelvis, the sacrum. Okay, here you can see that this is going to be the ilium. The ilium is going to have two parts. Okay, so based on the pelvis can be divided into two. It is going to be called as a true pelvis and a false pelvis. Okay, so anything above the anterior superior iliac spine. Okay, which is basically going to be the wings of the ileum. Okay, the this part is not involved in the uh, labor process. Okay, so obstetricians will call this the false pelvis, and anything below this, okay, which is going to this true pelvis is going to comprise of the pelvic inlet cavity and outlet. Okay, so this is going to be the parts of the true pelvis. Okay, so here you can see that this line here, this is going to be the line of the pelvic inlet. Okay, this is going to be the line of the pelvic inlet. Okay, so why should we know about this? This pelvic cavity is going to be assessed by the obstetrician to see whether the baby will be able to come out of the pelvis, or we have to go for a cesarean section. Okay, so that is why we are more worried about this cavity. Okay, so here you are going to have very important points to be bony prominence which you should know. Okay, so we are going to have the pubic tubercle. Okay, the pubic tubercle is going to be a elevated process in the pubic bone, and they're going to have a ischial tuberosity. Ischial tuberosity is the place where uh, we are going to give pressure when we sit. Okay, so this is going to be the strongest part of the ischium, and then you're going to have a ischial spine. Okay, this is called the ischial spine. So this ischial spine is going to be the attachment of the spinous ligaments, which is going to be sacrospinous ligament and sacrotuberous ligament. Okay, so sacrospinous ligament and one more ligament I'll tell you. And this ischial tuberosity is going to be the attachment of the sacrotuberous ligament. Why are we bothered about it? Okay, we are bothered about this because there are a few vessels and nerves which are going to transfer these cavities. Okay, so this is going to be called as a foramen. So we have greater sciatic foramen and lesser sciatic foramen. So there are vessels and nerves and sometimes even muscles which are going to traverse this cavities, and we are worried about the anatomy because we can use it to our advantage and it can cause us problems also. Okay, so that is going to be the pelvic inlet. This is going to be the outlet. Okay, so the outlet you are going to have uh, a bony area covered in the anterior region. Okay, and the posterior region is going to be covered only with this axis, coccyx. Okay, the other two sides we have only the sacrotuberous ligaments. Okay, this is only going to be the boundary. Okay, so these ligaments can be stretched to a certain extent. So we are the posterior part of the outlet, we can expect it to be a little bit malleable while the delivery happens. But the anterior border is completely full of bones and it will not develop, it will not budge at all. So like if the anterior part of the outlet is very contracted, then we will plan for a cesarean section because it is not going to let the baby outside. Okay, so I have discussed about the parts of the bones. Okay, so we will just have a look at all the muscles. Okay, what are the muscles which are going to compromise the uh, pelvis? This is going to be the pelvis floor and the pelvis. Okay, so the pelvis floor is going to be constituted mainly by the levator ani. Okay, levator ani is a muscle which has three smaller muscles combined with it. Okay, so this is going to be a muscle which is going to have connections with the coccyx. Okay, so if it is connecting the coccyx and the ilium, that is called iliococcygeus. If it is connecting the coccyx and the pubis, it is called pubococcygeus. If it is here as it is, okay, this part, the puborectalis muscle, will not connect with the coccyx directly. Okay, this is going to go around the anus, and there is a midline raphe. Okay, this raphe is going to connect with the coccyx. Okay, so this is three muscles of the levator ani which are going to form the pelvic floor, and on the sides you're going to have obturator muscle. This is going to be the obturator internus muscle, and above you're going to have the piriformis muscle. Okay. Other than that, you're going to have something called as the perineal pouch and the perineal membrane. We'll talk about this later when we're talking about external anatomy. Okay, so this we have a more clinical diagram. Okay, so here you have the pubic symphysis. Okay, you are going to have the levator-annus muscles. You have the pubococcygeus, iliococcygeus, and the where is the other muscle? Okay, rectalis is not labeled here, but there is going to be the rectalis muscle here. Okay, okay, and other than this, this is going to be the pubococcygeus. Okay, arising from the pubis to the coccyx, and this is going to be the iliococcygeus, arising from the ilius to the coccyx. Okay, similarly on the same side, and again you're going to have other muscles. Okay, this is called the coccygeus muscle, attaching the coccyx to the ischial spine, and then the piriformis muscle here. Okay, so all of this together will form the pelvic floor. Okay, so and here you're going to have the obturator internus muscle. Okay, this is the obturator internus muscle, right? So this is from when this is we are viewing from the above to below. Okay, this is like you're going inside the patient and you're looking at the patient from inside to outside. Okay, this is looking from outside to inside. Okay, so here you can see the pelvic floor muscles. Again, you saw the obturator internus muscle. Okay, this muscle here, no, that is here. Okay, this is the muscle, obturator internus. Other than that, you are going to see the levator ani, little bit of the levator ani. Okay, the pubococcygeus, iliococcygeus muscles. Okay, and one more thing I want you to understand this is here you are going to see the muscles which are not seen there. You are going to see the superficial transverse perineum, and you're going to see the ischiocavernosus muscle. Okay, so these are muscles which are going to be very important for you because this is going to, especially this superficial transverse perineum is going to be a part of the this deep pouch. Okay, this is this perineal pouch. This is going to be a part of the perineal pouch, and this is going to get damaged. This is going to get injured during delivery. Okay, so this is very important because if this is damaged during delivery, you will this is going to be one of the constituents of the perineal body. Okay, so this perineal body, if it gets injured, this is going to cause something called as prolapse. Okay, so what happens is the uterus along with the vagina will come outside the body and it will hang outside. Okay, that is because the uterus has a few supports. Okay, and the lowermost support is the perineal body. Okay, and that perineal body is actually something like a sheath or a area where all the muscles come and attach. Okay, so that is not a muscle per se. That is an area where all the muscles will come and attach. So if that component of the perineal bodies are damaged, then they can easily become weakened and they can cause UV prolapse or uterovaginal prolapse. Okay, so we will talk about this in another class. Okay, so this is how you have the look of the like pelvis when you are doing a sagittal section. Okay, so you have the pelvic floor. You have the again you have the levator ani muscles. This is iliococcygeus. Yeah, you have the iliococcygeus, you have the puborectalis, you have pubovaginalis, you have, see, all of them will constitute together to form the pelvic floor. Okay, and beneath this pelvic floor, you have the muscles which are going to form the superficial and deep perineal pouch, which is going to be the external anal sphincter and the superficial transverse perineal muscle. Okay, okay. So here you can see, okay, here you can see this is the level of the pelvic floor. Okay, this is the pelvic floor, and this is the level of the diaphragm. Okay, so here you're going to have muscles which are going to be part of the uh, perineal body and the pelvic floor, which when if it gets damaged is going to cause prolapse of the uterus and the cervix. Okay, so this table it will be there in all of your books, so just go and have a look at it. We'll just finish this class with the blood supply, okay, because after 6 o'clock I have one more class to attend. So we'll talk about the blood supply of the pelvis. So you're going to have blood supply directly from the aorta. Okay, the thing is, you're going to have supply from aorta. This aorta is going to divide into common iliac, and common iliac is going to divide into left and right side. Okay, so here you'll have the right common iliac artery. Okay, and that common iliac artery will divide into external iliac and internal iliac. Okay, so this is the internal iliac artery, and that is going to be the external iliac artery. Okay, why is it very important? Okay, common iliac will divide into external iliac and internal iliac. Okay, external iliac is going to be the main supply for the leg. Okay, internal iliac is going to supply the pelvic organs and muscles. Okay, why is this anatomy important? Because you have something called as postpartum hemorrhage or PPH. Once again. Okay, so in this postpartum hemorrhage, it actually means after delivery. So immediately after delivery, there is bleeding. Okay, there are a lot of conditions which can cause this bleeding, and you have different steps to arrest this bleeding. Okay, but ultimately, the last step, the final step, is to do hysterectomy. That is hysterectomy. That is removal of the uterus. Okay, this is the last step. Okay, so last before step is going to be something called as internal iliac artery ligation. That is, you are going to put a clamp or tie the internal iliac artery so that blood supply does not enter into the this pelvic vessels. Okay, so the problem is this is going to bleed from all the vessels here. Basically, it is going to bleed from the uterine artery, okay, which is supplying the uterus. But since this area has so many arteries, they are going to have a lot of collaterals. Okay, so to stop bleeding effectively, you need to ligate or occlude the main branch. That is going to be the internal iliac branch. Okay, why this is important is because sometimes or by accident, if the surgeon instead of ligating the internal iliac ligates the external iliac, the blood supply for the leg is lost. Okay, leg has only one primary artery for supply, that is going to be the external iliac. For the upper limb, it is the axillary artery. Similarly, for the lower limb, it is external iliac. So external iliac artery, if it gets injured, then it is very difficult for you to repair, and the leg will go for ischemia. Okay, so this is why you're supposed to know the anatomy of it very carefully. Okay, okay, so you have different branches. Okay, so at the level of S3 is where aorta divides into common iliac. Okay, so aorta divides into common iliac, and at the level of the sacral promontory, okay, a little bit above that is going to be where the common iliac divides into external and internal iliac. Okay, so here you can see the common iliac dividing into external iliac and internal iliac. Okay, okay. So and the one important aspect here is you have the ureter. The ureter will cross just medially to the division of the external and internal iliacs. Okay, so once where the ureter crosses just above the division of the external and internal iliac, again this can also be accidentally occluded instead of the internal iliac artery during ligation. That is why we are more careful about this area. Okay, so you have different branches here. Don't get worried. This is an important question for everyone. It is important question for you, for NEET PG, for me. Okay, this is the branches of internal iliac artery. Okay, I will finish up with this, but there's a very simple way. Okay, to understand the branches of internal iliac artery. You have three organs. Okay, so you have blood supply to three organs. You have blood supply to three areas. Okay, so this is a branches of internal iliac artery. Okay, so first organ, what all organ do you think will be there in the pelvis? You will have kandipa, you will have one bladder. Okay, so you will have the vessels for the bladder. You have the rectum. Okay, and you have the uterus. So three organs over. Okay, so for bladder you have superior and inferior vesical arteries. Vesical means bladder. Okay, so superior and inferior vesical arteries, you have two branches. Okay, for rectum you have middle rectal artery. Okay, so we have one more branch. So this is two branches. We have one branch for rectum, and uterus we have uterine artery, that is one branch. Okay, so we have now covered four branches. Okay, okay, so for areas we have three different areas. No, it is going to be the buttock, the perineum, and the inner leg. Okay, so for the buttock you're going to have superior and inferior luteal arteries. Okay, and you're going to have inner leg artery is going to be the obturator artery, and you're going to have internal pudendal artery for the perineum. Okay, because however ever you forget, you remember this, even if you keep a mnemonic, I forget the mnemonic. Okay, for me I don't remember mnemonics because there are many mnemonics for me. So in case you have a mnemonic, you can very well use a mnemonic for remembering. But I have this as 3. So I have three organs and three regions. So for first three organs I have bladder. Bladder has superior and inferior vesical artery. Rectum has middle rectal artery. Uterus has uterine artery. So we have four arteries there. And for the areas we have three areas: buttock, inner thigh, and the perineum. So buttock you have again two arteries. Okay, so we can remember like that also. Bladder and buttock have two superior and inferior vesical arteries, and inner thigh you have obturator artery, and last perineum you have internal pudendal artery. So this is going to be the branches of internal iliac artery. Okay, so we will finish off with this. The next class we will tell you when it is going to be soon. We will continue from the blood supply, and we will finish off with the other parts of the other organs and all. We will completely finish off, so that you will get a clear cut idea, and you will be able to answer questions for the UG exam and for the NEET exam also. Okay.